The front door to our house hardly ever gets used. We usually come in through the side door by the garage or the sliding glass doors that lead to the patio. To the right of the entryway is the formal living room, spotless, almost museum-like, but it's also the one room nobody really spends time in. On the left, a hallway runs down to 3 bedrooms, including our big master suite, plus a guest bathroom. That living room, always cloaked in shadows from those heavy curtains, has this elegant white camelback couch against the far wall. On either side are big wingback chairs, all arranged around a walnut coffee table. It never meant much, at least, not until that day. Late that morning, I found myself sinking into one of those wingback chairs, my back to the archway that separates the entryway from the living room. I've sat there plenty of times before, usually lost in thought, thinking about my life and what it might look like if things really fell apart with Lynn. Our marriage had been rocky for a while, and every time I considered ending it, I'd spiral into thinking about all the fallout, friends picking sides, maybe losing the house, paying alimony for who knows how long, and watching half my savings disappear into legal fees. Still, the hardest part would be facing Lynn herself. She's not exactly the type to go quietly. She's sharp, strategic, and frankly, a little cruel when she wants to be. As I was sitting there, lost in those thoughts, I heard the side door open. Lynn was back from grocery shopping. I instantly regretted not pretending to be in the bedroom. If she caught me in the living room, it could spark another fight, and fights with Lynn can start over absolutely nothing. She'll tear into me over the smallest thing, or make up a reason altogether, just to keep me off balance. She has a way of dragging arguments out for weeks, and even though I always try to defuse things quickly, maybe out of survival instinct, the peace never lasts. After 10 years of marriage, I'd come to accept there were really only 2 ways out of this: divorce or death. And still, I kept trying, mostly for my own sanity. I heard the freezer door slam shut. That meant she'd put away the frozen stuff. I braced myself, waiting for the inevitable yell or that piercing whistle she uses like I'm some kind of pet. It's enough to make my skin crawl. But instead of shouting, I heard her footsteps, light, measured, heading toward the entryway. If I'd looked over, I would have seen her stop on the tiled floor, scanning the hallway to make sure she was alone. She probably thought I was out back, still working on the gazebo like I'd been earlier that morning. That gave her enough confidence to make a phone call. I heard the familiar chirp of her flip phone. She was now standing just 5 feet behind me, completely unaware I was there, as she dialed the number. She started talking to her dad, going over plans for Thursday afternoon. She said she'd call him at work after 1, just to nail down the details. Her tone was light, almost cheerful. I sat there, silent, listening, heart racing, head pounding. But I didn't move. Years in the army and life in general had taught me how to keep still in high-stress moments. Rule 1: don't panic unless the bullets are flying. Use what you know. Pick your moment. Keep your face neutral, your breathing steady, and never tip your hand too soon. When she finished the call, I heard her walking across the carpet, heading toward the backyard. She started whistling and calling out, probably thinking I was back there working. She had no idea I was sitting 10 feet away, listening to every word. Once she stepped outside, I stood up and made my move. I walked into the den, keeping my tone casual. "I'm here," I said. "Was just in the bathroom. I need to hit the hardware store, grab a few things for the gazebo." I crossed the den toward the kitchen, heading for the side door, keeping my eyes off her. Honestly, I was impressed with myself for keeping it together, for not snapping. I walked right by her, and she gave me this look, noticing the flush in my face. "You should wear a hat," she said, like she was worried. "Your skin's gonna peel in a few days." Then came the real Lynn. She told me to bring in the rest of the groceries before I went anywhere, and not to be out all day. She tossed her phone into her purse and walked out back to check on the gazebo. That's how she talks to me. Everything is either an order or a criticism, sometimes both. As soon as she was gone, I grabbed her phone, checked the last number she dialed, memorized it, and slipped it back into her purse. After I put the rest of the groceries away, I got in my pickup. But I didn't drive to the hardware store. Instead, I pulled into a quiet park just a couple blocks away. And for the first 15 minutes, I just sat there. As I sat there in the park, I kept replaying that short phone call in my head, over and over, trying to lock in every word. I needed to remember it exactly, to write it all down later. There was no question about what I'd heard. Lynn was cheating on me. And worst of all, it might have been happening right under my nose, maybe even in our own bed while I was at work. That thought hit me like a gut punch. And what made my blood boil even more was the realization that I was the one funding it, busting my ass to pay for groceries, bills, this whole life, while she ran around behind my back. I started thinking, who the hell was the guy she called Daddy? It couldn't have been her real father. He lived over 1,000 miles away in California, and the area code on the call was local. Then it hit me. During the early years of our marriage, Lynn used to call me Daddy, sometimes during sex. She'd stopped doing that a while ago. Back then, I thought maybe it meant she wanted kids. But a couple of years in, we agreed not to have any. Still, she'd always been a daddy's girl. The more I turned it over in my mind, the more it started to click. That guy wasn't her father. He was her lover. I needed to figure out my next move. He'd be coming to the house Thursday afternoon, she made that pretty clear. Probably slipping in through the back gate off the alley. I thought about ambushing him out there. But then what? How would I handle Lynn in the aftermath? If he was on foot, then his car had to be nearby. Probably parked at that little park I was sitting in. It was close enough to walk and wouldn't raise any flags. I needed to know who he was. The obvious first step was to call the number from her phone. I figured it'd be better if someone else made the call, maybe pretend it was a wrong number. If it came from a woman, she might be able to get more info out of him. But who could I ask? Who would even believe me? Then it clicked. Lynn's best friend, Sue. If Sue didn't know what was going on, then no one did. Lynn's sister was out of the question. They'd barely spoken since that nasty divorce a few years back. They weren't close anymore. I considered asking Sue directly. I'd known her as long as Lynn had. She'd always been decent with me, and I liked to think she was my friend too. But women can be fiercely loyal to each other, sometimes more than to their own husbands. Sue was married to Nick, a good guy, about 15 years older than her. They seemed like the perfect couple, always affectionate, always solid. I figured if Sue knew anything, she might have told Nick. And maybe Nick would tell me. We weren't best friends or anything, but Nick was a straight shooter, a guy you could count on. I couldn't imagine him sitting on a secret like that if he really knew something. So I decided to go find Nick. He volunteered at the local golf course on Saturdays, some goodwill deal where he got to play free rounds during the week in exchange for helping out when the course wasn't packed. I figured I'd find him cruising around in a golf cart somewhere. On the drive over, I rehearsed what I'd say. I couldn't just come out with it. If word got back to Sue, and then to Lynn, I'd be screwed. I had to be careful. When I finally found Nick checking the 7th hole, I hopped into his cart and started small talk. Then I eased into a hypothetical. If someone told him something in confidence, would he keep it from Sue? Did they always share everything? He gave me a look. Weird but curious. Drove a few more feet before pulling the cart over onto the grass. Then he turned and looked straight at me, like he was expecting more. Got a specific question, man? He asked, with that same intense stare. I nodded. Told him I needed him to keep something between us, that I wouldn't bring it up again, but if Sue ever asked, I wouldn't lie. That was my line. I keep secrets, but I don't lie. And I could tell from the look in his eyes, he knew something. He'd been holding it in, probably waiting for me to ask. So I did. I came right out and asked if he knew anything at all, about Lynn having an affair. Now or in the past. And then, he let it all out. Like a dam breaking. He told me about something that happened last New Year's, at the Holden's party. Everyone was outside, getting ready for the fireworks, but Sue had gone inside, said the champagne wasn't sitting right. She doesn't usually drink much. While she was upstairs getting sick, she heard someone jiggling the bathroom door handle. After she cleaned up and stepped into the hallway, she heard something. Voices. Movement. She followed the sound around the corner. And there, at the end of the hall, Lynn. Pinned against the wall. Some huge guy had her wrapped up, her legs around his waist. Hands all over her. She saw Sue standing there, and just smiled. Gave her a little wave like, "Scram." Sue didn't say anything at the time. But on the way home, she told Nick everything. Sue and Lynn were close, really close. So Sue didn't want to do anything until she'd had time to talk to Lynn. But now I knew. I knew my wife was cheating. And she'd been doing it a hell of a lot longer than I'd realized. Nick told me that after the party, he'd push Sue to come clean, to tell me everything right away. But instead, Sue had a private talk with Lynn first. According to Lynn, what happened with Buddy White was a one-time mistake. She blamed it on too much champagne, a fight between us, and Buddy being his usual aggressive self. Buddy had a reputation. He was the type of guy who bullied people because he could, flashing his money around like it gave him a free pass. He'd married into wealth, and that only made him worse. Sue, knowing all that, asked Nick to keep it to himself. She didn't want to blow up our marriage over what she hoped was just one drunken lapse in judgment. Nick made it clear to Sue that if I ever asked him directly, he wouldn't lie. And he stuck to that. "This secret's been eating me alive for 5 months," he said, his voice heavy. "I'm honestly relieved you asked. I hate what you're going through, man, but at least it's out now." But the truth was, this wasn't over. Not even close. Sue had been lied to. Lynn was still seeing Buddy. Or maybe it was someone else now. Either way, I'd just heard her talking to the guy an hour before, calling him Daddy, with that same flirty tone I hadn't heard in years. I told Nick we needed to head back to his place. I wanted to see what Sue had to say for herself. We took separate cars and met back at their house. Nick broke the news to Sue, and when she realized the affair hadn't ended, she broke down in tears. Sue had held out hope. She truly believed Lynn had made a one-time mistake. She wanted to support our marriage, to believe the best in her friend. But when she learned the affair had continued, it hit her hard. She felt betrayed, just like I did. Until now, Sue had acted based on a lie. "Sue," I said, "there's something I need you to do." I told her I'd checked Lynn's phone and saved the number she'd called. I asked if she'd be willing to call the guy, pretend it was a wrong number, and try to get his name. I needed confirmation. I had to know for sure who Lynn was tangled up with now. Sue didn't hesitate. She had a PhD in English literature, worked from home as an editor, and even had a bit of a theater background. Social engineering was basically second nature to her. She switched to this flawless English accent, the kind that stuck with people, and dialed the number on speakerphone. "Hi, this is Buddy White," the voice answered. Sue blinked. "Oh, sorry, wrong number," she said sweetly, then ended the call. "Well, that was anticlimactic," she muttered. Her whole setup, the act, the backstory, all wasted. But it didn't matter. We had what we needed. Buddy. Lynn was still with him. And now I needed a plan. I told Sue I wanted to catch them together that Thursday. I didn't just want some half-baked confrontation. I needed undeniable proof. I wanted to look Lynn in the eye with facts she couldn't wiggle out of. But hiring a private investigator felt like a waste. It'd take time and cost a fortune. I needed something quicker. We all sat quietly for a bit, thinking. Then Sue spoke up. "You need a mole," she said. "Someone Lynn trusts. Someone who can pull the truth out of her." I was skeptical. But Sue's eyes narrowed. "Never underestimate a woman who's pissed off," she said. "I've had enough of her lies, the way she's treated all of us. I think I can spin a story that'll get her talking." So we started plotting. Within the hour, we had a plan. Sue would call Lynn and pretend to be in a crisis, something personal, something juicy, and ask her to meet for coffee Sunday morning. Nick would modify one of Sue's old purses, hiding a camera inside it to record everything Lynn said. We'd catch her expressions, her tone, the whole thing. By noon Sunday, we hoped to have every answer I needed. Sue got right to it. She called Lynn and played it perfectly, referencing how things had gotten messy at the New Year's party and that she needed someone to talk to. Lynn, always eager to play the wise, worldly friend, agreed to meet. She even sounded kind of flattered by Sue's vulnerability. Sunday morning, Sue arrived early at a quiet coffee shop. She picked a corner table under an awning, away from the foot traffic. She set the purse on the table, angling it just right, then tested the audio. No wind. No noise. Perfect. Nick had done an amazing job rigging the thing. The lens and mic were hidden under the purse's floral pattern, all velcroed inside for easy access. When Lynn showed up, Sue asked her to grab the coffees while she held their spot. The second Lynn stepped away, Sue hit the record button. Once they were both seated, Sue kicked off the act. She told Lynn she was confused about this guy who'd been showing interest. Said he was good-looking, charming, and she was tempted. She claimed things had gotten cold with Nick, that they hadn't been intimate in a while, and that she just needed advice. Then she asked Lynn how she felt after what happened at the New Year's party. If she had any regrets. Lynn didn't hesitate. She leaned in, smiled, and said, "Go for it, girl. Honestly. I just don't get why you haven't done this sooner," Lynn said, laughing softly. "Nick's sweet and all, but let's be real, the man's past his prime. You, though? You're still young, still gorgeous. I've always admired how you look, Sue. Honestly, I never understood why you settled with him." Sue blinked, stunned by how casually Lynn brushed everything off. "Wait, so that thing at the New Year's party, it wasn't just a one-time slip?" Lynn smirked and leaned in, lowering her voice. "Girl, I won't lie to you now. I had to say that back then or you might have told Paul. But now? We're in the same boat. You get it. We can be honest. Actually, I'm kind of excited. We're gonna have some spicy stories to trade now. This could be fun." Sue kept her cool and asked, "So, how did it all start? You and Buddy, are you still seeing him? You should see your face right now," Lynn teased. "If you're not tempted yet, you will be." She went on to describe how she and Buddy really kicked things off at the Holden's Halloween party 2 months ago. He'd been eyeing her all night, and eventually they snuck away to the upstairs landing. One thing led to another, and they ended up in the bathroom. According to Lynn, it was hot, passionate, and exactly what she needed. And yes, they were still at it. She even planned to meet him next week, in her own bed. Sue, playing her part perfectly, asked gently, "But what about Paul? Doesn't it mess with your head? Don't you feel guilty?" Lynn just laughed. "Paul's my husband. You don't treat a husband like a lover. That's not their role. Paul's there to pay bills and do what I tell him. Buddy? He's for everything else. He gives me what I really want." She described her strategy, keeping me docile, predictable. I was the good guy who brought home the paycheck and followed orders. She even said she checked her perfume and covered her tracks, just enough to make me believe she'd never cheat. Then she compared me, her husband, to a little gay best friend. Someone harmless. Easy to manage. She loved knowing where I was at all times, never worried about me catching her. Sue, sticking to the plan, asked, "Were there others before Buddy?" Lynn didn't even blink. "Please. I lost count." She talked about her first affair, some random guy she picked up at a grocery store during our first year of marriage. He never even knew her real name. They'd sneak around to different hotels for 6 months until he got clingy and she dumped him. Then came a string of one-night stands. A kinky salesman who only visited town a few times a year. She kept it casual, low risk. But Buddy? Buddy had stuck around longer than most. She called him a hound with a splitting tool. Her words, not mine. She bragged about how his wife, Anita, was totally clueless. Working while he played. Lynn said she controlled when and where he could see her. Sue then pivoted to her fake story about her own supposed lover, a man named Rod. She sprinkled in enough fake details to sell it, and Lynn didn't question any of it. In fact, she encouraged her. "You gotta take what's yours," Lynn said. "Trust me, Nick'll still be there. He'll settle into his place. They always do." Sue expressed doubt, saying she didn't know if she could control Nick the way Lynn controlled me. Lynn leaned back and grinned. "You ever watch nature shows? There's always an alpha. And there's the rest of the pack. I'm the alpha with Paul. You should be the same with Nick." Lynn then offered some practical advice: how to start slow, how to test boundaries. She said Sue should start with Rod, enjoy herself, and let Nick fade into the background. Then she brought up STDs, like it was just a minor inconvenience. Asked Sue if she used protection. Sue, still acting, said she usually did. But with Buddy it was hard, he got rough. One time it even hurt to pee, but the doctor told her it was just irritation. There was another time, she claimed, when she actually got gonorrhea. After that, she was more careful. Lynn laughed and said she'd covered her own infection by letting me think it was from playing guitar with my buddies, some nonsense about hygiene. Then she gave me a choice, about treatment, which led to a fight when I found out she'd been on antibiotics. Once she was sure the recording had everything, Sue ended the meeting, thanked Lynn for the talk, and headed home. Back at the house, Sue and Nick watched the footage with me. We were stunned. Appalled. Sue and Nick said they barely recognized the woman on camera. Around others, Lynn had always been charming, respectful. But there? She was cold. Cruel. Ruthless. And me? I sat there, numb. Maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, but I still was. Hearing her talk about me like that, like I was some harmless, clueless puppy, it shattered something deep. Sue brought up Buddy's wife, Anita. She said Anita seemed like a good person, tired maybe, but kind. And clearly unhappy in her marriage. Sue wondered if we should tell her the truth. But it was risky. If Anita lost it, she might go scorched earth and blow the whole operation. Still, Sue couldn't stop thinking about it. About whether Anita deserved to know the man she was married to, and what Lynn was really capable of. She told us she'd handled that part on her own and thanked me and Nick for trusting her. She also made me promise not to do anything reckless. And I did. I admitted. I'd already made mistakes. I admitted to Sue and Nick that I'd made some mistakes over the past 10 years, mostly in how passive I'd been, but I made it clear I wasn't planning anything violent. I told them I'd handle this my own way, on my terms. I just asked for their silence. If Anita White happened to call, I didn't want anyone answering. I'd take full responsibility when the time came. Later that night, Sue took it upon herself to reach out to Anita. She introduced herself over the phone, reminding Anita they'd spoken a few times at the Holden's parties. She asked if Anita could talk freely, and when she got the green light, Sue gently brought it up, that Buddy was cheating on her, with someone Sue personally knew. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, Sue heard it, soft sniffles, a shaky breath, then quiet sobbing. Anita opened up. She said Buddy had cheated on her before, not just once, and that they'd supposedly patched things up a year ago. She'd only taken him back because he swore up and down it would never happen again. She'd warned him clearly, one more mistake, and she was gone for good. Sue offered comfort. She told Anita she could help however she needed, no pressure, just support. Anita thanked her and said she appreciated the honesty. She told Sue she was done. There was no going back this time. Buddy wouldn't be sharing her bed ever again. Then Anita dropped a bombshell. They had a prenup, a very specific one. And if she could prove infidelity, it would leave him flat broke. No house. No spousal support. No safety net. He was basically unemployable, she said, a kept man, useful only as arm candy for events and for his extracurricular flings. Now? He was going to pay for it. I offered to gather whatever evidence she needed. Anita promised she'd keep it together for a few more days, just long enough to get everything in writing. She didn't want Buddy to suspect anything until she had the upper hand. Sue set up a meeting between us. She called me at work and told me Anita would meet me Monday at 1 p.m. in her office. That afternoon, I walked into Sue's office holding a small video camera. Anita White sat behind the desk, the woman married to the guy my wife had been sneaking around with. I placed the camera gently on her desk, queued up the right section of the footage, and hit play. The screen wasn't great, but the audio was crystal clear. She listened. Her eyes welled up almost immediately. But there was no screaming. No dramatics. Just a slow, painful processing of everything she was hearing. When it ended, I reached out, not sure what I was even trying to offer, maybe just acknowledgement. Maybe just to say, "I see you." She thanked me. Said she'd seen glimpses of this side of Buddy before, but this was final. I told her about my plan, that she didn't have to be involved if she didn't want to. But the offer was there. She nodded. Then she said something that stuck with me. She told me she'd spent years being intimidated by him, pushed into silence, guilted into staying. But now she was going to flip the script. She wanted him to hurt. When I asked her if she was worried about things getting ugly, she didn't hesitate. "If it gets messy, it gets messy," she said. "But I want him to feel what I felt." I told her I understood. After that meeting, going back to work was impossible. My head wasn't in it. The things Lynn had said in that recording, the way she talked about me like I was nothing, it just played on a loop in my mind. And as much as it burned to admit, there was some truth in it. I had been passive, accommodating, always trying to keep the peace. I didn't see it as weakness then, just survival. But now I saw what she saw. She thought I was a doormat. And on Thursday, I was going to show her I wasn't. Tuesday and Wednesday dragged by. I barely got anything done at work. My mind was locked on what could happen, how things might play out. I planned and replanned a dozen scenarios, trying to stay ahead of every possible outcome. I even started working out again. Just in case. Back at home, the air was tense. Lynn could tell something was off. Our conversations were limited to the absolute basics. She kept watching me, trying to figure out what had changed, trying to regain the control she'd always had. Funny enough, she was looking forward to Thursday too, but for a different reason. She probably thought a steamy night with Buddy would help her clear her head, maybe even bring her some clarity about our marriage. That Tuesday night, while she was in the shower, I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser. I was looking for something from long ago, something from my grandfather. Both he and my dad had served in the military. Grandpa had landed at Normandy. After the war, he'd brought home a souvenir, a set of steel knuckles he'd taken off a German soldier. They were heavy, cold, and ugly. And right then, holding them in my hand, I wasn't sure if I felt grounded or afraid. I remembered what Grandpa told me when he gave me the steel knuckles, to only use them if I absolutely had to. He said they might come in handy one day, but I had to be sure. That day was almost here. This wasn't just some argument. This was war. Only Lynn and her new lover were playing dirty. And I'd had enough. That Thursday morning, I made myself eat a big breakfast. I knew I'd probably skip lunch, but I needed the fuel. I had a plan, and I needed to keep my energy steady, nerves sharp. I spent the morning pacing in my office, prepping everything in the guest bedroom. I didn't know whether Lynn would stay in the backyard once she let him in or whether they'd go inside. Either way, I was ready. I could adjust. The steel knuckles sat on my desk as I walked laps around the room, letting the anger build, not blind rage, but focused, tightly coiled fury. At 1 p.m., I changed into jeans, a plain t-shirt, and my sturdiest running shoes. I double-checked my pockets, phone, keys, wallet, the knuckles. I picked up the desk phone and called Lynn, wanted to beat her to the punch, in case she tried calling first. I kept my tone calm, steady, told her I'd be tied up in meetings all afternoon and might be late getting home. Nothing threatening. Just setting the stage. She sounded relaxed, maybe even relieved, probably thinking I'd gone back to my usual passive self. She had no idea. Lynn got ready to meet her lover and left just after 1:20. They arrived at the park in about 20 minutes. I was watching everything. But the guy's car wasn't there. Turned out, Anita had dropped him off nearby. He jogged the rest of the way, then slipped into our backyard through the side gate, ducking behind the big Fatina bush at the far end of the house, opposite the garage. I was already in position, crouched and waiting, phone muted, watching the clock tick. At 1:45, Lynn stepped outside into the yard, wearing nothing but a string bikini. She headed toward the back gate, unlocked it, peeked into the alley, and then closed it behind her. Then she settled into a lounge chair under the pecan tree, like she hadn't a care in the world. That was my cue. I'd left the side gate slightly ajar earlier. I slipped through, circled around to the front door, and let myself in with my key. My feet crossed right over the spot in the hallway where days earlier, my world had cracked open. Inside the spare room, I grabbed a cordless drill and a small bag of hardware. Less than a minute later, I was in our master bedroom, quickly screwing a metal hasp into the inside of the door frame. I left the padlock hanging loose, didn't want to close the door just yet. I wedged a sliver of wood between the door and the frame to keep it from shutting all the way. My heart was pounding. Back in the guest room, I grabbed the camera, slipped the brass knuckles over my right hand, and waited. I knew anything could go wrong. Maybe I'd forget a step. Maybe Lynn would unlock the gate early. Maybe the guy would get there too soon. But none of that happened. Everything was falling into place. I stood near the door, brass knuckles tight on my hand, camera rolling, breath controlled. At last I heard the sliding glass door open, their voices drifted inside. Lynn's laughter mixed with a low male growl. I could picture him putting his hands on her. Then I saw her. Her bikini top was already gone. She and her lover moved into the master bedroom, not even bothering to close the door behind them. I followed, careful not to make a sound. Still filming. I knelt just outside the doorway. Buddy had his arms around her. Lynn's eyes were shut as she unbuttoned his shirt. I quietly placed the camera on the dresser just inside the room, angled perfectly at the bed. Waiting was the hardest part. I wanted to catch them in the act, undeniable, on video. I wanted the whole truth recorded so she couldn't talk her way out of it. I stayed outside the door, only peeking briefly now and then so they wouldn't spot me. They were all over each other, slowly undressing, taking their sweet time like they had the whole afternoon ahead of them. Then I heard her. She called him Daddy. That was it. It confirmed everything. My pulse spiked. The anger I'd been holding down surged to the surface. I peeked again. He was between her legs. Then, the moment of betrayal. He thrust forward, and Lynn let out a scream I'd never heard from her before. They started moving together, bodies tangled, voices rising in raw, filthy ecstasy. I didn't need to see more. I touched the steel knuckles one last time, for luck, and stepped forward, silent as a shadow, toward the bed. And then she saw me. Just before everything exploded. I didn't hesitate. I drove my shoulder into Buddy's ribs, throwing him off her and onto the floor. He yelped as he landed, and I yelled something, I don't even remember what exactly, accusing him of violating my wife. His face changed instantly. Gone was the smug charm. He shifted into full bully mode, squaring up like he was about to handle me. He moved around the far side of the bed, probably thinking I was backing off. He was wrong. Lynn, now on her knees and clutching the sheets to her chest, started yelling at me. Get out! Don't hurt him! But I wasn't listening. I planted my back foot, took one hard step forward, and slammed into him, right into his chest. The steel knuckles on my hand landed flush on his solar plexus. The hit drove us both to the floor, me on top of him, crushing his lungs under my full weight. When you can't breathe, everything else stops mattering. He started writhing, trying to push me off, his breath coming in short, high-pitched squeals. Panic filled his eyes. Straddling his chest, I watched as his hands fumbled at the carpet, trying to get leverage, trying to breathe. And then, I delivered the final blow. I lifted my right arm high and drove the steel down, hard, into the center of his face. With no room to move, his skull had nowhere to absorb the hit. I heard bones crunch, loud and awful, and watched blood explode across his nose and mouth. He was done. The blood pooled fast, spilling into his throat. He couldn't speak, couldn't scream, just gargled in agony. I stood up, heart still racing, and turned to leave the room, ignoring Lynn's screams. But then I heard her voice change, desperate, fearful. "Paul, wait! Please, help him!" That stopped me. She thought I was walking away. That this was all I'd planned. But I wasn't finished. I reached down, kicked the small wedge of wood away from the doorframe, swung the door shut, and locked the hasp. When I turned to face her, something in her eyes shifted. She realized we were locked in together now, just the three of us. She was half naked, completely exposed, and facing a version of me she'd never seen before. Her voice softened, trembling. "Paul, oh God, I know this looks bad, but he forced me. He's a bully. He threatened to hurt me. To hurt you. I didn't want to do this. I swear." I stepped closer, my face expressionless. "Shut up," I said, calm but cold. "Don't lie to me. I know you've been with him for months." I glanced down at Buddy, still wheezing, blood bubbling at his lips. I didn't want him dead. Just ruined. I tilted his head slightly, making sure he could breathe. Then I dragged him closer to the iron frame of our bed and rolled him on his side to help the blood drain. From the top drawer of the dresser, I grabbed 5 pairs of handcuffs, cheap ones, but they'd do the job. One by one, I locked down Buddy's wrists and ankles to the bed frame. His body barely resisted. Then I turned back to Lynn. She hadn't moved. Just sat there, frozen, staring at me. I pulled her legs off the mattress and twisted her arms behind her back. Clicked the last pair of cuffs around her wrists. Then I walked her into the bathroom and sat her down on the closed toilet seat. "You're not going to try anything stupid," I told her, holding up my right hand so she could see the steel gleaming under the light. "Because now, it's your turn to talk." I wanted it all. How she met Buddy. Why she did it. Why she thought it was okay. And who else, if anyone, she'd been with over the last 10 years. We had time. Plenty of it. I wasn't going anywhere. She looked at me for a long time, weighing her options. I could see it in her eyes, calculating. She didn't know what I already knew, and she wasn't sure how much she could get away with. Finally, she sighed. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I didn't plan it." She started with how Buddy had cornered her at a party, the Holden's place, I think, and how he'd been aggressive. She claimed she didn't even know what he was after until they were alone upstairs, that she froze, and by then, it was too late. I asked her which party. She hesitated. "That New Year's one," she said. Wrong answer. I stared her down. "No, Lynn. Sue saw you at the New Year's party. But you weren't with Buddy then. It was Halloween. I know you've been with him more than 20 times since then." She paused. That was the moment she realized the jig was up. She knew Sue had told me. Maybe even recorded her. And she knew her back was against the wall. But I wasn't letting her off the hook. Not now. I asked Lynn straight out who might have exposed her affair. She crossed her arms, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. "You'd be surprised how many people know," she said coldly. "You think Loverboy didn't brag to anyone? Maybe it was one of them. Doesn't matter." Then she narrowed her eyes. "It was Sue, wasn't it? That bitch. I'll claw her eyes out. And don't think I can't ruin her life too. I know something that'd destroy her marriage." She started rambling about Rod, Sue's fake lover, claiming it was all her idea. She insisted they made it all up just to mess with me, to make me think Sue was in the same boat. Said Sue had recorded everything, backed it up to a bunch of DVDs just in case, and kept it all secret until now. But I cut her off. "I didn't learn this from Sue," I told her. "I got most of it from your own mouth. Remember Saturday morning, right here in the entryway? You were on the phone, calling him Daddy, pouring your heart out like no one was listening. She blinked. That hit home. I told her I didn't need anything else from her now. If she had more to say, she could talk to my attorney. She'd be hearing from him soon. Then I pulled out my phone and called Anita. Kept it short, but it got the point across. I ended the call with a chuckle, then turned back to Lynn. I marched her into the bedroom. There, I said, pointing to the bed. That's what's left of your man. Take a good look. Buddy was a mess, bloodied, cuffed, wheezing, stripped bare, barely conscious. Lynn gagged. I turned off the camera and unlocked the bedroom door. Anita stepped inside a moment later, her face unreadable. I gestured toward Lynn. Well, Anita, I saved you a piece of him. His face isn't much to look at anymore, and this, I said, motioning to Lynn, is his newest conquest. My soon-to-be ex-wife. Lynn, I added, anything you want to say to her? Anita didn't wait for an answer. She walked up and slapped Lynn hard across the cheek, leaving a perfect red mark to match the one on the other side. You absolute fool, she hissed. I can't believe I ever respected you. Look at the trash you're lying with. Then Anita turned to me. What do we do with him now? I sighed. I'm tempted to toss him outside naked and see how long it takes for someone else to pick up the trash. Anita cracked a bitter smile. Get it? I said. Companion. That's what you called him, right? I glanced at Buddy's groin and said, I'm just glad you didn't break his little toy. I've got a brand new hunting knife. Maybe I should slice it off and gift wrap it for Lynn. She seemed to really like it. Anita snorted. Maybe we should store his balls somewhere safe, like a vault. Keep them away from the rest of the women in town. I nodded. He's not getting a dime if this prenup holds. But maybe I'll throw him a crumb. Just enough to remind him who's in charge now. We agreed to get him to the hospital. We'd make up a story about finding him injured in the garage, anything to keep things quiet and keep him cooperative. He'd know better than to push back. As for Lynn, well, I let her get dressed. Told her to take her car and go think somewhere else. But I cut off her credit cards and bank access. I handed her a quarter on the way out. Here, I said, for a payphone. Seems fitting for a two-bit fancy woman. After everything, Anita and I stayed in loose contact. Sometimes we'd check in on each other, two burnout survivors not quite ready for another round. I'll admit, I didn't like how I'd treated Lynn that day. That version of me, the cold, calculated one, that wasn't who I wanted to be. But in war, cruelty has a way of crawling to the surface. Still, I had no regrets about wrecking Buddy's smug face. Anita's insurance paid for the repairs. Then she cut him loose, gave him a little more than the prenup required just to get him out of her life. He tried to date again, but women weren't exactly lining up. As for me, I sank deeper into myself. Barely went out. Depression hit hard. Lynn got a decent settlement and moved in with her sister. She started therapy, I heard. She told someone she still felt sick when she saw nature documentaries. Whenever someone mentioned alpha dogs or pecking order, she'd get this haunted look in her eyes. Sometimes she even had nightmares about that day. She missed me sometimes. But me? I never missed her.